sometimes I find it really hard to be able to just be like, I'm sorry, I miss my dead husband. And because, you're in a new love and you're still in love with your, deceased husband. And it's amazing how strong the brain is. That's what I'm learning through all of this.
That's something that I'd just like to add. Being someone who experienced the same thing, I get it, and I don't get jealous about it. I encourage her to, um, explore those emotions and talk to me about them because, I understand and she understands, that we both have very, very much have a strong love for these people.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives, in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. I am so happy to have today with you guys Devine and Elizabeth Hall. Now, this is going to be a unique call because I'm interviewing two people at the same time. We have Liz and I actually met at CrossFit a while. Do you remember how long ago that was, Liz? When did we meet at CrossFit?
It had to have been at least a year ago.
At least, right? So it was like, and it was, I had just gone back for like a little bit and then we ended up talking and you shared a little bit of your story. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then this is way before I started doing the podcast. And I've never met Dave just by passing. And then you guys will find out the kind of the circumstances of how we all are kind of connected. But I'm so happy to have you both here. Thank you for joining the podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Our
Thank
pleasure.
you. All right. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start off by let's start with let's see, Dave, you are a widower and yours happened first, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So let's go with your story. So if you want to just tell us a little bit about you. What do you do? And a little bit about your life, and then I'll just start asking you a few things.
Sure. Yes, my name's Dave, and I'm originally from Southern California and relocated to Texas in 2011 for my work. I'm a federal firefighter. I work on a military installation in East Texas, and um, my wife Sherry was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer shortly after our daughter was born,
Mm.
and um, she battled it for 5 years, um, and we went through quite a bit together and as a family, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
I know it's hard to sometimes talk about these things. And by the way, for the listeners, the reason I'm having Dave and Liz on is because they're a couple. So this is going to be a unique interview for that reason too, because it's also how they support each other in this process too. So I'm intrigued. I'm finding out with the listeners as I'm interviewing. So um, Dave, how old was your daughter then when Sherry passed away? How old was she?
When she passed, she was 3 or 4. I think it's
Oh,
4.
wow,
Yes.
4. And
Yeah.
and this was what year did she pass away?
In 2019, in January.
Oh, wow. Okay, it's been so recent, and it feels so recent. It feels recent now. I don't know.
Yeah,
Everything
in
seems
some
recent.
ways,
It's
sorry.
recent yet far.
Right.
Recent yet distant. Yeah. Now, when she was going through cancer, yeah, when she was going through her process, did she go through chemo, all that during those 4 to 5 years that she was battling?
Yes. Like I said, she was initially diagnosed stage 4, so there was no
Mhm.
warning or anything like that. Our daughter Olive was about 4 months old when when we found out. She was just having pain kind of diffuse through her whole body and trying to figure out, what was causing it. And just through a routine, um, her gynecologist checkup, she discovered a lump. And once we mentioned, back pain and things like that, it was, you know, just numerous scans and all this stuff. And before we knew it, you know, it was discovered throughout her entire body. So she started out, uh, you know, in a bad place. I was having to basically care for her and our daughter at the same time, and it got to the point where I was having to, carry her, to the bathroom and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, so yes, initially chemo. It's just kind of the first round of how things start out. Whenever those of the listeners who have experienced cancer or probably understand how this works, and it's
Yeah, including
first
myself. I
round
have
chemo.
yeah, my mom died of cancer, so I understand that component of it too, so I can relate.
So chemos, numerous chemos. We petitioned very hard to get into MD Anderson pretty
Mhm,
much right away, and so that's where we started our journey, and stuck with them for the entire time through numerous surgeries as well. Because as you know, the cancer, once it's stage 4,
mhm.
typically kind of comes and goes. So yeah.
Wow, now you moved here from California to Texas. Was Sherry from Texas? Because then what kind of support did you guys have in terms of family in this area?
Yeah, no, Sherry was actually from the DC area.
Oh, wow.
We met in California and then moved here. Um, as far as support, initially it was quite difficult. Like I said, it was just myself and some of our close friends. We really leaned heavily on them. They came through, and as well as Sherry's family. Her mom came out, and her sister, and a lot of extended family members came out and just kind of helped. Sherry was very adamant about keeping our daughter Olive away from the hospital aspect, the
Mhm,
treatment aspect. So, initially, you know, when Olive was an infant, she didn't really understand. So I was carrying her around the hospitals and things like that while Sherry was at her appointments. But once we got some more support, Olive would stay at home with most of the time my mother-in-law, Raya.
mhm. Well, that's great that she was able to move here basically during that
Mhm.
time to help you with that because that is a lot. I was just wondering because I'm sure that a lot of people are in those circumstances too, in which they may just be alone in wherever they live with no family around to help them in this process. So, and the fact that you did it as you were raising a newborn as well, that is just a lot.
Mhm.
Now, after during her, when she passed, and what words do you prefer to use, by the way, in terms of passing or death, or after her death, after her passing, after her loss? What are the words that you usually use in your vocabulary regarding that?
I don't have a set term that I uh, use or whatever anyone's comfortable with. I'm
Okay.
okay with.
So there's no trigger words that if I may say that may like, so I'm asking it just because sometimes, if by chance I say something that for the person I'm talking to may be a trigger word, then I just want to make sure to be sensitive. So you're comfortable talking about it, if I say after her death is it's okay in your vocabulary too.
Yes.
Okay. So when she passed, then what were the words you used to describe for Olive what had happened? Like how did you yeah, I mean, she had only known her mom being sick, right? So
Mhm.
how was that transition for you and for Olive?
Uh, Fortunately, the hospital we were at towards the end had a child life specialist, so I got her involved. Um, and like I said, uh, Sherry liked to preferred to keep Olive away from the
Mm,
hospital and treatment aspect. So while she knew that we traveled to Houston all the time, pretty much every week, she didn't really see that side of it. So uh, she also saw, I mean, Sherry sick multiple times. I mean, that with the stage 4, I mean, it had spread um,
Everywhere.
her liver at certain times. It'd be in certain areas of her body that would cause her a lot of pain, and so she would be, just kind of in bed. But at her in her brain, at one point, she had to have surgery as well. And so Olive was kind of, I mean, she's a very smart kid. She was very aware of what was going on. Um, but at the same time, Sherry was very strong. She did not, and independent. So if, and very driven to support those who were in a similar situation as herself.
Mm-hmm.
And so she would keep herself busy all the time. I mean, I remember one time it was right after her brain surgery. Like within 3 hours, she was on the phone talking to vendors, trying to raise money for her organization.
Mm.
She was very driven, and so
Oh, wow. I just got
yes,
chills on that. I just got chills because that's sometimes too, like what kind of drives our focus away from us is serving others too, right? It's like the best way to also heal. So in her case, that's where she would put her energy was serving others.
yes, yes, most definitely. She
Mm.
was very focused on that. So going back to your original question, yeah, I mean, I spoke with the child life therapist, um, and just kind of got feedback from her as to how I should approach it. When I did have the conversation with Olive, it was very difficult, and her initial reaction to me was, I was very, honest and open about it, and
Mhm.
I feel like that's the best way to be with children is, and anybody in that regard. Um, and I just explained to her, about Sherry being sick, and that she fought as hard as she could, and it just um, she couldn't fight any longer, basically,
Mm.
and that she was gone, and you want to say so many things at that time, but
The
it's
age,
hard.
right? Yeah, especially also because of her age, you kind of have to just be wise as to what words you use particularly too, right? For that particular age that she was in. And then I'm sure that as she's gotten older, maybe she's asked a little bit more about it. Has she?
In some aspects, yes,
Mhm.
in others, not so much.
Okay.
I think because of her age at the time and just all of who she is, she's very kind of black and white. And so, yeah, her initial reaction to me was she got very angry with me and ran and hid in her room. And so I had to, you know, um, you know, go in there and talk to her and yeah, all those things. So, um, but yeah,
Yeah,
she'll ask, questions as her brain becomes more developed and she's able to think about it in more abstract ways. It's kind of like a revisiting, and that's something that the child life specialist had expressed to me is that as her brain develops, you can expect to deal with this throughout her life, at certain ages and benchmarks, and then also big life events. So that's kind of how
okay.
we handle things that we expect that they'll come, and try to just maintain consistency with that. So
That's wonderful. Thank you, Dave, and thank you for revisiting that and for sharing up to that point. So now we're gonna swap it, and I'm gonna now I'll unmute Liz so that so that the background noise. And if you want, I can mute you, Dave, and that way, if by chance you have to move or anything like that, then it won't pick up. And then we'll ask Liz some questions. So. Um, Liz, now if it's your turn now to share a little bit then about your, so I'm going to go back and forth here and then we'll kind of mesh both stories then together. So, um, tell us a little bit about you and Bryan and the girls.
Sure. So I'm Liz. I'm originally from the Buffalo, New York area. Due to Bryan's job, we lived all up and down the East Coast from 2005 on. Um, Bryan and I were actually high school sweethearts or whatever they call it. So we have been together since 11th grade and went to college together and all that fun stuff. And so we moved all over the place for Toyota. And um, right now, currently, I am just a stay-at-home mom, because as much as 2019 sucked, as right after Bry died, I got laid off from my company as well, which was a blessing in disguise because it's given me time to heal and really focus in on my little ladies in my life. But anyways, we moved to Texas in 2017, I think, to make it our forever home. We were sick of the traveling with Toyota. And so by coming to Plano and working at headquarters, there would be less travel. And we found an awesome neighborhood and, built our dream house with a pool and, spa-like backyard. And everything was great. And then in March of 2019, Bryan went to CrossFit for the Open. He was a hardcore CrossFitter there every day, usually at the 5 a.m. class, which I thought he was crazy because he would get up at 4:30, and I just couldn't function at that time. So he went to work that day. He went to CrossFit after work for the Open and called me and told me he was going to be late because there was traffic, some sort of an accident. And I said, that's fine. He came home, he took a shower, ate a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then said he wasn't feeling well. And 2 hours later was pronounced dead of a widowmaker heart attack. And my entire life changed in a matter of 2 hours.
That is just. I remember when I was with you sitting there at CrossFit after I think we had just worked out and I was chatting with you and there was I think there was a picture of him at the gym, like him and then all
Yeah,
the
Mike hung
people
up a
around.
picture of his crew,
Yeah.
his
Yeah. And
5
then
a.m.
so I was
crew.
like, yeah, so I was like, oh, I remember the conversation. I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, what is that? And then you said, it's like, no, that's my husband. And I think when I met you, it had just been a few months. It had been maybe 2 to 4 months, maybe when I met you that it had been very recent.
Yeah, it was definitely fresh. And I remember when I met you, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's my husband. And then you were like, oh, I'm a grief counselor. And I was like, holy cow, somebody just dropped you out of the sky for me.
Yeah, it was just kind of like a weird kind of, yeah. And so tell us then the ages of your daughters and their names as well.
Sure. So I have Eva, who is currently 10. She was 7 when Bry passed away. And then I have Emily, who's currently 4. And she was 2 when everything happened.
So now this is a very different dynamic than what happened with Dave and Shari because of being sudden. Then you didn't have that time to kind of prepare them for something coming. You had to just share with them the news right away, just as you were finding it out yourself. So there was no anticipatory grief or anything like that happens. It's just right away. So how was that? Because he was young, right? He was under 40,
Oh, yeah, he
correct?
was 36.
36. Um, 36, you have 2 girls. How do you then communicate this to your daughters? And again, you have the same situation. Your family is not here in Texas either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was definitely not easy. Thankfully, when everything went down, my older daughter was at a friend's house. So she was unaware of anything going on, and the little one was sleeping. My neighbor actually came over. My one neighbor went with me to the hospital. Her husband stayed to watch the kids. And when Eva came home, he just told her that daddy got hurt at the gym and mom's at the hospital with him. And she finally went to sleep. Um, she's a worrywart, so I'm sure she was a little nervous, but never had anything. My mom did pass away in 2015 of cancer, so she experienced that, but that was still different, and she was still really young at the time. So she, went to sleep with nothing to worry about. And then when I got home, at that point, it was probably like 4 a.m, I would say. My 2 neighbors were with me, and she was sleeping on the couch, and I had to make the decision if I wanted to let her sleep and tell her in the morning or tell her right away. And I made the decision to tell her right away. And I can't even tell you how I told her because I don't know how I had the strength to do it, but something just took over. And, I sat with her and my neighbors, they were like, we'll go home. And I was like, absolutely not. You need to stay. And so they sat there and listened. And I pretty much, I think I said something along the lines of, daddy's heart got hurt and it just couldn't start beating again. And the doctors tried everything they can do, but daddy went to go live with Nani up in heaven. And so that's where he is now, and he won't be coming home. And I think initially obviously there was shock. She kept just like asking, like, wait, what? Wait, tell me again. But she is like she's a little rock. Like Bry was definitely a rock, and she took after him. So she was quiet. I think she definitely cried, but there wasn't, like how Dave had said, Olive ran off screaming and mad. There was none of that. It was just very much like somber and quiet. And she just laid there and hugged me. And then with Emily in the morning, she was clueless. She had no idea. So really with her, she was just comic relief and, just hugging on them all day long after that happened.
Did you take them to the funeral?
So they did. We ended up we had the wake one night. I did not let them go to that because it was open casket and I didn't want them to be there. But then the next morning we did a closed casket, just quick little ceremony. And they did go to that, and they were, once again, most likely comic relief to, many people that were there and that were sad. And they understood, well, Emily didn't, but Eva understood what was going on. And then we actually cremated Bry, but didn't bury him until July. So then we had to go back home again to Buffalo and have that whole ceremony over again, where we actually buried him, and both girls were there for that.
Mm-hmm. Was that hard, like having then several ceremonies, like redoing it again? Like, so March he passed away, then July, then doing the ceremony again. Was that hard, or was that actually uh, part of your grief journey? Did it allow you to kind of then allow things to sink in?
Yeah, it definitely was not easy. I remember dreading it, having to go back and revisit everything again. And his parents wanted to make a bigger deal out of it, which I totally understand. It's their son, where I wanted to just be done with it. We left the funeral in March, and I actually, instead of flying back to Texas, I flew with the girls to Florida. I took them to Disney World. One of Bry's mottos was "Go big or go home." So I was like, "What the heck? We're going to Disney World." And so we went to Disney World. My dad had a condo on the ocean, so we went and stayed in the condo, and we just had a fantastic time. And through efforts of amazing friends, I had a friend from high school give me his timeshare. He donated it. I hadn't talked to him in 20 years, and he was like, "Nope, you're just staying at my timeshare." And then I had another friend from work who called Disney World and was able to get my girls fast passes for the entire day. So it was much needed to, gallivant off to Florida. But then going back in July, like I said, it was definitely hard. I think the hardest part was that I was home for I think it was a week, and we were saving the actual burial till the second to last day I was home. So there was a lot of anticipation throughout the week that I was home. But it was, it was necessary for his parents. I've described to Dave when we talk about it that like the funeral was not for me. It was for everybody else. Like I said goodbye to Bryan at the hospital. That was the end of it for me. And, he's in my heart now. And I know the funeral was what other people needed. And along with the, the burial in July and whatnot. So, yeah.
You raise a very good point, which is the aspect of honoring how different people within the family unit need to deal with their grief journey.
Mm-hmm.
And um, that's important because it's respecting what everybody kind of needs for their own process. And for you and the girls, like you knew how Bryan would have probably done it, which was going to Disneyland. You were just like, let's just let's do this. Let's have, like like a last hurrah type of thing, right?
Hmm.
As a little family. And that was your way of honoring his memory. And for the others, it had to be also just the rituals, of the funeral and so forth. So um, that is wonderful that you were able to honor the ways in which the other family members needed that too. So thank you for sharing that. Now I'm going to bring Dave back in so that you guys can then now share then how did you two meet then, and so it all, both happened in the same year, and how did you guys meet?
Sure. Do you want me to start, Dave?
Yeah, you're probably better at it than me.
Who
um,
wait, who wait, let me just ask this. Who will share the juiciest details?
oh,
Like,
probably
then
me.
I'm just joking, I'm joking, I'm
I
joking.
feel I'll be more
Yeah,
honest, but Liz will probably share more.
so oh,
So we live in an amazing neighborhood in Prosper, Texas, and I was actually unaware, well, not fully unaware, but a little unaware of Dave's story, um, even though we're in this really tight knit community. But my neighbors were all aware of his story, and we had a community spring Easter egg hunt gathering thing at the Commons, and my one neighbor was like, "You need to meet him." Not romantically or anything like that, but you just need to meet him. You guys have so much in common and you could be such a good support for each other. And I was like, maybe. Like, I'm very shy. Well, at least I used to be. And that terrified me, the thought of like having somebody introduce me to somebody. And I was like, okay, we'll see, whatever. And so we went to this Easter egg hunt thing, and I was there with a group of my friends from Toyota. And he happened to walk by, and I was like, hey, that's him. And then I have no idea what, like I said, I'm shy. I have no idea what pushed me to do this, but we ended up in a group all talking. And then there was this bout of awkward silence where somebody was waiting for somebody to say something next, and I just walked over to Dave and looked right at him, and I said something along the lines of like, "Hi, I'm Liz. I know you just lost your wife. I just lost my husband, and I just want to let you know that I'm here for you if you need anything. I know you have a daughter." I was probably rambling, because I was definitely nervous, and he just looked at me, and um, we exchanged numbers, and the point of that was because he kept telling me how he had worked with a child life specialist at the hospital, and he had all sorts of resources in terms of therapists and things for the girls, and so we exchanged numbers there. And I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, Dave, or
Yeah,
your.
I just remember I was um when she told me I I I don't normally hug strangers, but I put my arm around her and gave her a quick squeeze, and
hmm.
I was compelled to support her and especially her little ones. Uh, I, I guess because of my role in Olive's life, I was very much mom and dad for majority of the time. Um, she was growing up. So um, while I may be limited in my vocabulary and the things I say, I'm very emotional when it comes to understanding, and I'm very in tune with that. And so, I felt terribly for her and her daughters. Um, and yeah, I was very focused on, um, trying to help them. I'm a firefighter, so by nature, I tend to want to help people as well. So
You're very empathetic. Like the empathy level was there, and like that being drawn to taking care of others, like you said, you could feel it, and especially when you've gone through something yourself, then it has even more of that empathy because you've
right,
lived it. You've lived it.
right. And I felt like I had something I could help her
Mm.
with, being that, like you said, hers was sudden and mine was prolonged. I've, had the convenience, if you want to call it, but um, of years of therapy and dealing with these things and understanding a little bit more of what she might be experiencing and going through. Um, and so I thought I could offer, you know, some help there, not only for her but for the little ones.
And the funny part is, as I was unaware to any of that. So in my mind, I'm saying to myself, oh, geez, if I died and I left Bry with two little girls, he wouldn't have a clue on what to be doing. So I'm looking at Dave going like, oh, I can help you. I have girls. You're going to need help. And ironically, he is way better than me at all this stuff. So
So it's the other way around than what you thought. Yeah.
yeah.
Now, now then, so how did that support, then happen? Like, how did you guys then from that first meeting, did you just start texting, kind of giving each other resources? How did that dynamic go?
Yeah, I mean, mostly it was me providing resources for her because I had a lot of information from the child life specialist and also some insight on local therapists because I had all of um, I had tested out a few, so to speak, in the area for Olive. So it was more of that thing, and then also I was really wanted to get the girls together, and I think Liz would agree to that. That we wanted to get them together, just to, especially I think for Eva and Emmy, they had each other, and so
Mhm.
they had somebody who understood it kind of in their own way. Whereas all of her none of her friends, like had experienced anything like that, and so I wanted her to see, and also Emmy and Eva to see that there are other kids like them. I didn't want them to feel um, you know unique in that way, um,
Mhm.
in that terrible experience. And
It's so
so,
interesting. Yeah, what you're bringing up is so interesting because I mean that's the whole reason of then organizations like what we're going to talk about also too of how you and I kind of crossed was because I just barely was from because then you also started using the services of the organization that I am a grief facilitator at, but FYI, this was not like not not intentional. We had I had already known Liz prior to me volunteering here. So what I was gonna say is that with the adults, like a lot of times we think like it's a lonely club, right? It's like this lonely club. You're the only one that's experienced it. But the fact that then children too, they're also going through this. It's a very isolating space, like you said, like in school, like when they do things like uh things for Mother's Day, or in Liz's girls' case, like things for Father's Day, and they do art for this and that, and that's really hard to go through those things alone and with kids in your own classroom not understanding what you're going through. So that was great that you created then that bond or wanted to create that bond between the girls so that they could support each other aside from then the two of you also supporting each other.
right, yeah, I think as parents, and especially when you quickly become a single parent, you know, it's hard to navigate your own grief because your your primary focus becomes them, and making sure they're okay. And it's kind of odd because uh, throughout my experiences, I've learned that the kids are very matter of fact, and very much more accepting of whatever occurs compared to us. So, and a lot of that has to do with their brain development, obviously, but um, yeah, they would say things so matter of factly, like it's just like you said, going to events like I took Olive to a Valentine's Day um, celebration at her pre-K at the time, and it was definitely a big trigger for me. But
Mm,
she would, just go to her friends and just randomly tell them, my mom just died, and have no emotion about it. It was just that's what happened, and her friends would be like, "Oh, okay," and they wouldn't know how to process it. And obviously for me, it was much harder to hear, but understanding that for her it was more of just that's just how kids are. And
mhm.
so
No, thank you. Okay, so then now, how did you guys then navigate then the starting to get to know each other and then realizing you guys had then feelings for each other? What point did that kind of start? And how did you, let me just put it that I ask very I, too many leveled questions. So let me start there. At what point did you guys start realizing you were having feelings for each other in your process?
I think a lot of it, so like Dave said, we would text back and forth. So there was definitely a lot of texting back and forth and just realizing that not so much that we had so much in common, but it was just so easy to talk to each other and be a support for each other and add a bit of a smile to our faces during such a trying time in our lives. We went to a couple of lunch quote unquote dates, just especially when the kids were at school and with Dave's schedule, he's home some days, gone some days. So just really, you know meeting each other that way started to get to the point where it's like I found myself at least wait excited for the next text message to come in and excited to be able to go out to lunch and things like that.
Mm. It was just very organic how it
Very
happened.
like
Yeah,
scary organic, like it just was so easy.
talking about it. And, I think when you experience something like that in your life, you pretty much become more of a, you don't beat around the bush. You're just very open and honest about things. I was already someone who was that way, so it just made me even more so. And we were, talking about it, and had circumstances been different, we still would have probably, had a relationship together if it wasn't for the events that brought us together. So we complement one another very well, I believe, and that's so it just happened to be that we experienced these things, and that's how we met.
Mhm. Yeah, that you met because somebody told you you should meet that other person because they've gone through something similar, but in reality, there are other levels of commonality that you guys have in your personality. That's not the only that's just the thing that made you guys meet each other. All the
Yeah,
rest of the things are the things that yeah, um, to have that support. Now how then did you navigate that dynamic of still being able, and how do you still do that? Because grief, as most of us know or experience, it's kind of in waves and it kind of goes in and it's not necessarily that it ends. So, how do you navigate the dynamics of having a relationship and still honoring uh, Bryan and Sherry and in this process, and of course with the girls?
definitely. I mean, it's definitely a process, at least in my mind, that is sometimes so easy and so organic, and then also so incredibly difficult. I always say all the time to Dave, I'm like, I sometimes wonder how my brain just doesn't explode because in 1 second, you could be like, I am so happy. This, new little family is just perfect and everything is going well, but then in the next second I'm missing Bryan, and sometimes it's like really difficult for your brain, or at least my brain,
Mhm.
to be able to look at Dave and be like, he'll be like, what's wrong? And I'll be like, nothing. And he's not dumb, he knows something's wrong. And sometimes I find it really hard to be able to just be like, I'm sorry, I miss my dead husband.
Mhm.
And because, you're in a new love and you're still in love with your, deceased husband. And it's amazing how strong the brain is. That's what I'm learning through all of this.
Mhm.
And that's
Mhm.
that's something that I just like to add. Being someone who experienced the same thing, I get it, and I don't get jealous about it. I encourage her to, um, explore those emotions and talk to me about them because I understand and she understands, that we both have very much have a strong love for these people still and always will. We'll always have a place for them and they'll always be part of us. And understanding that, helps us kind of be there for each other even more so because I feel like Liz has a friend who experienced a loss of his wife and I don't mean to out him or anything like that. I don't know if it's going to be an issue, but um, he met somebody who came from a divorce, and I know they have a harder time uh,
Mhm.
navigating those emotions that are still there.
That is such a interesting point that you bring up because it's true because the other person is still somewhat in the picture, right? In
Hmm.
that
Oh
case,
yeah.
it's a little different here. But I love that you guys are able to still honor and talk about your spouses in that way, and that also must bring a lot of comfort too to the girls. So how then do you talk about the girls with the girls, sorry, about this relationship? Again, because of their ages, they probably still don't even see it as, do they see it as weird that daddy and mommy are now with some, you know what I mean? Like, how is it?
Yeah,
How is it for the girls?
I mean, I would say, I know we keep using the word organic, but I mean, I would say it was a pretty seamless process. Like initially, I ended up offering to help Dave out with Olive because his in laws had to travel or something like that. And so I prepared a room in my house for her and I made it, loving and warm so she would feel comfortable here. And she's just happy go lucky. So she's like, cool, this works for me. And, my girls, I think Eva, my older one, uh, she's very protective of me. She's taken over that rock role that I used to say that Bryan was my rock. And she put their guards up at times, but she knows I'm happy and she knows that Dave loves her and that, this is a good situation for her. And really, I mean, I could think of a million different ways how this could have went, and it went just beautifully. I mean, everything about this transition into this, I always call it life 2.0, has just been beautiful.
Yeah, we
Mm,
had initially we had spoke about, before we went ahead and started to cohabitate, about how we wouldn't force things and just kind of take them as they go. And if at any point it became too much, whether it be for, Liz or myself or the girls in any way, we would, pump the brakes. And it just, I mean, um, kids are very resilient. Humans are very resilient for that matter. But
yes.
they just kind of accepted it, and they treated it like, oh, now I have a new sister, and kind of, and Olive looked at it like, now I have two new friends or sisters,
Mhm.
and that's kind of how it went. I mean, I don't think that it's something that it doesn't seem to come up too often. Um, I know that the girls, when they do bring it up, it tends to be during emotional times. Say they're not having a good day or they're having a moment where they're crying, and then all of a sudden it'll come up.
Mhm.
But other than that, it's not a topic that comes up very often. If anything, it's the girls encourage. I know they encourage me all the time. They they're they keep wondering when we're going to get married.
Uh,
Um, so
so
they're very much
they're the
the
pushers.
pushers. Yeah.
They're the pushers. It's so funny that you said about the when they're having a bad day that maybe that's when it comes up. But that's also like in any dynamic, when kids are having a bad day, that's when they say, "You don't love me. I'm
Mhm.
adopted. You found me on the street." Like all these kind of things, those kind of that's the moment in which kids usually say all that kind of stuff. So I'm imagining in this circumstance, it's not much different. They just kind of use maybe this dynamic as a scapegoat in those moments that they're feeling
I,
frustrated or
I
something.
I think there's some truth there, but I also feel like it's also, I think, I think children have a little bit harder time of accessing those feelings, and
Mhm.
when they feel those in that moment, that's kind of when that feeling then presents itself to them, and then they kind of let it out, and
Oh, I
their
like
own
what you're
way.
saying. Yeah, so it's basically like their grief is showing up sometimes in those moments of frustration or things like that. Is that what you're kind of saying? Like maybe
Yes,
they're frustrated, but they just don't know how to name it.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Name the emotion. Okay. That is so true. Okay, so let's now talk about what tips would you give somebody then that may be in circumstances similar to what you guys were before meeting each other and navigating. Again, you guys may not have the answer because this happened organically, but navigating life in getting to know people. Like what would you say to somebody that's in, widow or widower?
I think the one thing, like, pre-meeting Dave for me, um, the biggest thing that helped me was a support system. Like you had said, I didn't have family in the area. My dad did come to town, and he actually stayed here for 5 months, which I was shocked by because he likes to visit, but 5 months is, out of his comfort zone. And then my neighbors, like when everything first happened, I didn't do a thing. I literally sat in my house and I had people, my door was always open. I had neighbors cleaning out my fridge, vacuuming my floors, packing my suitcase to go home, feeding me breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It was an outstanding, outpour of love, to the point where when everything first happened, I was like, I am moving to Buffalo. Like, there's no way that I'm staying here. I have no reason to be here. And now I can't imagine leaving because my neighbors that surround my house are my family.
Mm,
So
so
definitely, and I'm not one to ask for help. So definitely just accepting help is huge, when everything first happens. And then, in terms of putting yourself out there again and meeting new people and whatnot, I joke all the time that I wish every widow could have a Dave, because it has just made this process that much easier. But like we said, it's so organic in the way that it happened. But really surrounding yourself with people that are in a similar situation. I know, like you said, we joined Journey of Hope, and I also have a couple of other widow friends that I can reach out to, and they're on all different capacities. So, like, I have one friend that he actually lost his wife the day before Bryan died, and he's local and also a sudden death. So, in the beginning, I was reaching out to him all the time because he absolutely 100% understood every feeling I was feeling, in almost, real time. So, really just finding people that work for you in terms of your healing and your grief is what has helped me along the way.
so two things that came up from what you just said. One is accepting help.
Hmm.
That is huge. So if you're not a type of person, which I'm similar to you, I'm not the type of person that would ask for help. But accepting help during that time, that was key. And the aspect of making sure to surround then yourself with people that support you. And that in this case, because you didn't have your family nearby, all your friends became that, so that at least that immediate support here.
Hmm.
Now, that's awesome. Thank you. Now, Dave, what about for you? What were like some of those key tools kind of that just similar to what Liz just shared? What would you say would be some tips from you?
Yeah, so I would definitely reiterate what you said about letting people do things for you. I also do not like help. um, However, um, I discovered that that's pretty much the only thing that helps others
Hmm.
feel like they're doing something for you. And then you get a lot less of the questions of like the awkward questions from them. If you just let them do some stuff, that's nothing serious, just whatever it may be, little things, and people jump at the opportunity to do that for you, and it definitely helps them feel like they're doing something for you. Um, for me, I mean, I've had a lot of experience with trauma in life in my past before this, so I very much believe in therapy and being open and honest about things. Along with that, I think moving forward with trying to um, I mean, I don't want to say find somebody else, but if you happen to um, moving forward with your life, um, I would recommend that people. It's easier said than done, but not to judge yourself too harshly because um, there's a lot of people out there with opinions, and valid as they may be for them. The important thing is to know and understand is that you yourself and your family are going through this thing. Only you understand what works for you and your family, and kind of finding that is really one of the more important things in my opinion. um, and not try not to concern yourself too much with how others may view things, or what how they might feel about things, because again, they're not going through it. They're experiencing it in their own way, whereas you're living it. And that's all the difference to me.
Yeah,
But
that was
Yeah.
definitely a big thing for me in the beginning too, of just because I mean, Dave and I met relatively soon after everything had happened in our lives, and
Mhm.
I was very aware of what if people were judging me, in terms of, wow, she moved on too fast, or wow, she must be in such shock that she's just going after the first guy that says hello to her. And
Mm.
it definitely, it ripped me apart for a long time. And I got to the point where I finally just realized that, if somebody truly loves me and cares about me and cares about my happiness, then they just need to trust me that I am doing the best thing for me and my family, and just, trust the process, which is another thing that Bry used to say all the time. So,
and
Trust the
you'll make
process. Mhm.
we make mistakes along the way. That's going to happen. It's part of life. That's part of learning. um, but I think if you go into it with the idea that um, without forcing things, and taking things as they come, it's much easier to move forward than it is if you hyper focus on one thing or another.
What you guys have said is just like so wise. It's so wise. And thank you so much for sharing that because it's so true. Like, we sometimes stop ourselves, and not just in the aspect of grief, right? But just in many areas of our life. We worry so much of the what people are going to think about the choices
Hmm.
we make. And we close a lot of doors because of that, of basically making other people's opinions about our life and our choices way more than our own,
Yeah.
instinct. And what you guys shared is so amazingly valuable for many, many reasons. So thank you. And love is so wide. It's like, I always think of this. I remember when we were expecting our second child, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, how could I love somebody as much as I already love my son? And it's like, no, it doesn't take away from me. Love is not like, oh, now you're adding something else. Like, you suddenly can't love, your first child
Yeah.
that much. No, you still
mhm.
love. It's the same in this dynamic. It doesn't take away from the love that both of you have for your spouses. And it's just adding to it. It's even making it more rich.
Yeah, that's another thing that I always say is that I'm not moving on. I've been very clear on that from the beginning, that there's no way I'm moving on. I'm just moving forward. I'm moving forward with my life, and Bryan will always be carried with me into life 2.0, through the girls and through the memories that we had. And I'm excited to bring him with me, and I'm excited to, move forward and enjoy my life, because that is 100% what he would want me to do. And, a crazy thing that he used to say, I don't know why I used to get so mad at him. He used to say, if anything ever happens to me, you're going to find somebody in 2 months and you're going to be happier than ever. And then I would usually smack him and be like, stop talking like that. You have two girls, like nothing's going to happen to you. You're healthy. And then, I mean, crazy and as made up as this sounds, I basically met Dave 2 months to the day that Bry died. And
Mm.
so to me, I was like, oh boy,
I
this,
Yeah.
this says something.
Yeah, actually, can we talk about that aspect of, because I know, like with you, Liz, of our exchanges on Facebook Messenger, of our conversations kind of through there, knowing that certain things are just absolutely divinely, and we use that word a few times, and then we would make fun because Dave's last name is Divine, right? So we're like, some of these things are divinely kind of orchestrated. Can we please go there and talk about your guys' feelings in terms of the spiritual component of all these dynamics that have occurred in your life?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll be upfront and honest that, I grew up Catholic and used to go to church all the time. And once Bry died, I lost all faith in any sort of faith. And I'm still not back there yet. However, when things like this happen, like Bryan has said multiple times, within
Mhm.
2 months, you're going to find somebody. And then all of a sudden, 2 months later, here's this person that literally, I joke that I feel like my mom and Bryan got together and were like, oh crap, that wasn't supposed to happen. Now we have to find somebody really good for Liz and, drop Dave into my life. And so it's hard for me not to, not to say I don't believe in anything, but there's definitely something to be said about the way that this is all worked out.
And what about you, Dave? What about for you in terms of your beliefs in your life, your spiritual beliefs or background? And spirituality doesn't necessarily have to be with religion necessarily, but if do you see um any input that maybe Shari has even had in this whole dynamic of your life?
Um, that's kind of a different situation for me. Sherry was very much um, like, throughout the process, we had a lot of friends who were going through cancer treatment as well, and she lost a lot of friends in the process. And I remember on one particular occasion, there was a couple who, um, the wife, it was with cancer, and she was actively searching for a fill-in essentially for her when she died because she knew she was
Oh,
going to.
wow.
And she found somebody and her best friend, and they ended up, her best friend and her husband ended up getting married, I think within a year after Ashley had passed. And so um, Sherry had very strong feelings about that, and I think for her it was different because she didn't, I I think she didn't want to feel forgotten. Um,
Hmm.
and
That's
so
okay.
for her it was like that. But I always think back, to those times, and how much she loved me, and Olive, and how she would want us to be happy, because I think any spouse wants that for the person they love. And
Hmm.
closing yourself off to the idea of loving again, um, is not, in my opinion, how you live a happy life. Um, I kind of wanted to bring that up when we were talking about, other people's feelings, and moving forward, and that's another aspect I think is allowing yourself to go down that scary road again of allowing yourself to feel, love for someone else again, because it can be very scary throughout the process to open yourself up to that potential hurt again. Um, but having said that, I kind of just I I was raised Christian. However, through my life experiences, have kind of gone away from organized religion in that sense. But I kind of believe more is, if I have a spirituality, it's more of a natural one, and you know just kind of take things as they come, and that kind of thing. So what
No,
happened
thank
with Liz and I was just, while I was scared, I didn't want to shut myself off to it, because I felt like for whatever reason, this was being presented to me and I had to explore it. So
I love it. Thank you for both of you for being so transparent about your backgrounds. And again, just it goes back again to everybody interpreting things differently, because I come from that. Like, I'm the type of person that everything's like a sign. That's me. So I'm looking at your relationship and being like, oh my gosh, like that's so divinely orchestrated. Like that was my perspective. And I didn't mean to project my perspective here on you guys, but I'm so grateful that you each expressed your perspectives in terms of how things navigated. And Dave, when you pointed out how Sherry used to be like not necessarily wanting to be replaced, like you said, I
mhm,
feel that a lot of times too, when we're still living, that component of the ego part of us, right, is still there.
yeah,
That I feel in my perspective that when we die, like the ego is no longer there. So that aspect of attachment to something no longer exists. So whatever we would have thought as individuals here, like, no, you're going to love me forever. You're never going to move, those kind of things, like, move on. You're never going to have somebody else. Those, and I'm not trying to say that those are the words she said at all. I'm just kind of saying that then that doesn't really matter anymore, right? Once there's no ego.
Yeah, understanding, I think for me was that she was scared, and
Mhm.
so and I understand completely where she was at that time when that happened. But I too also knew how deep her love was for me, and Brian's for Liz and all that. Like we would we would only want the best for our loved ones once we can no longer be here for them physically. Like you know, how do
How
you
could we
serve them
not want any differently?
right?
Right,
And
right.
so
Mhm,
and yeah, so that's understanding that we're not forgotten. We're always there. I mean, every time I look at the girls,
mm,
I see Brian in hers, and I see Sherry in mine, and
mhm,
every day, it's a reminder. So, and there's some beauty in that. It hurts sometimes, but also other times it's comforting to know that they're here with us still.
mhm.
In one aspect. So,
Oh, so beautiful. Thank you. Is there anything else either of you wanted to share that maybe I didn't ask, um, that you'd still want to share with the audience?
she's
If
quiet
there's
all of a
anything
sudden.
else I
I'm thinking. Uh, no, I mean, I think you definitely touched upon a lot of things. I think like when I was, because I'm totally type A, and I was trying to prep for this conversation, even though I didn't have an agenda and I wanted an agenda and all this stuff.
I
But
know, I'm like, "No, I don't create any
I know,
questions,
I'm
Liz,
like,
I just
I need a
talk."
syllabus. um, but anyways, when I was looking through different grief stuff, I mean, I'm the proud owner of an entire bookshelf of self-help grief books, because I'm always the type that if there's an issue, I grab a book and I'm like, oh, the book will fix it. So I've read tons and tons of books, and that's definitely helpful for me. But one thing that really stood out to me as I was prepping for this was that there was this quote I found that said that grief is like glitter. And you know how much parents hate glitter because it gets everywhere. But grief is like glitter. So you can throw a handful of it into the air, but when you try to clean it all up, you're never going to get it all. So even long after the event, you're still going to find glitter tucked into corners, and it'll always be there somewhere. And when I read that, I thought about that, and I was like, you know what? I'm okay with that. Like, I'm okay with the grief. I don't want the grief to go away. It is a pain in the butt, and they describe it as waves, and you ride the wave and all of that. And I have my ups and downs on a daily basis, usually multiple times a day. But what I've learned from my reading and researching and all of that is and processing is just really that grief is just, it's love, and it's a piece of love. And where there's a deep grief, there's always going to be love. And I don't want that glitter to go away. I want to be able to just find the glitter and smile when I see the glitter, so to say.
I'm
If that
like
makes
I'm like loving that. That's the first time I hear that description, and I'm so like writing it down. I love that because the waves, I feel the same. I feel it's like a roller coaster,
Mhm.
grief is, all these kind of different analogies, but I had never heard the glitter, and I'm just like thinking of it like it's so true. And when you have girls, you know that there's glitter a lot of places, right? Like because I have a daughter as well, and I just remember like, oh, I'm so annoyed or getting a card in the like
Yeah,
I got a
with the
Christmas card that had glitter and I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And then I'm still finding little pieces of it. Oh, this it's like perfect analogy. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for navigating the non-scripted interview here, Liz, for your type A personality.
I keep telling Dave that I was like, I always tell him, I swear I was not type A before I met you. This is all part of like me trying to control the situation. And he keeps saying, no, I'm pretty sure you were like this before and you just didn't realize it.
Hadn't noticed it. Yeah. Yeah, you probably had not noticed it. Maybe you notice it now more because of the aspect of like control, like certain things we either, big things happen in your life that you could had no control over. So maybe now you may notice more the things that you are trying to control,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
think that's definitely a part of it. And I think that when Bry was here, he was definitely a workhorse, the go-getter. It was very work focused. And so I did a lot that I didn't even realize I was doing and that I was in charge of. And now that he's gone, it's even more apparent of, everything that I do and have to handle. And it's all coming out now that I'm a total type A control freak.
Well, I love that Dave just said, no, you were just like that before. You're just noticing it now. Well, it's been such an honor chatting with you both and getting to know you at this level. And I feel that when you have these kind of conversations with somebody, you really get to know them. And I've only walked by you, Dave. I don't think I ever even said hi because I didn't know who you were when I ran into you at the Journey of Hope. But I'm so grateful to have gotten to know you both and all the wisdom that you both shared, not only to the audience, but just even for myself. So thank you once again.
And thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having us. We're, at least I am. I love sharing our story. And I'm, happy to help other people.
Yeah, to that, I'd say, I have a long drive into work, and so podcasts, especially on grief, have helped me tremendously. Just kind of be by myself and figure things out, and I understand how important these podcasts can be for other people who are experiencing something, yet they might not have the words to, you know, to say to somebody else or express it or even feel comfortable doing it around other people. This definitely serves a purpose. So thank
Yeah,
you
it's
for allowing us to
tool.
go ahead.
No. Sorry, go ahead. One other
No, just
tool for people in their grief
yeah.
journey.
Definitely.
No, and thank you because again, it's all these different varieties and diversity of stories that somebody else would then listen to and find that relatability and learn from that too in their own life. So I really, really, really appreciate the time you both took. And I know Dave, you just had come back from a long, shift from work, and you haven't. Did you get to sleep before you
Yeah.
hopped on the call?
Yeah.
He's already worked out. He's a go-getter.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.